Now, another thing that you find all over the world, and which also goes back to our shamanic tribal ancestors, is the notion that you can purify consciousness by exposing yourself to harsh ordeals. And that practice is called asceticism. We have the remnants of Western asceticism embedded in the English language, in certain idioms that we use. For example, to wear a hair shirt or to flagellate yourself. You've all heard these expressions. Well, these are actual practices that were and actually are still done within the Christian contemplative tradition. That's called asceticism, ascetical practices. The idea being that by exposing yourself to this discomfort, that in some way this will purify away your sinfulness or reduce your original sin, and therefore get you closer to God. Similar practices exist in tribal cultures. And yes, there's a notion that they can be purification. I suspect that the notion that these are purifications came about secondarily. Can't know for sure, but my conjecture would be that our ancestors originally exposed themselves to these physical ordeals, primarily in order to enter the realms of power, where they would encounter spirits, where they would attain healing powers, they would have visions. Okay, you can take workshops in shamanism, and it's like you drum or you do these different things, and it's like two weekends and you did a seminar in shamanism, and that's sort of like, what, now I know what shamanism's about. When you do shamanism in traditional cultures, it usually involves hair-raising physical ordeals that most of you know about because we have a connection with the native community here. You have to put yourself through things that you wouldn't think like throwing a little cold water over your body is a joke compared to a sun dance. It was probably the case that people exposed themselves to these ordeals in order to enter altered states, enter the spirit realms. And then, I'm guessing, they discovered that as they were doing this, they were changing as a person. Something about them was getting better. So a paradigm of asceticism evolved, where it's like, okay, it's not just that exposing ourselves to these harsh sensations thrusts us into the spirit realm, but it also purifies our consciousness. All around the world, you can find ascetical practices. If you read the standard histories of Buddhism, they will usually say that the Buddha rejected asceticism. However, I wouldn't exactly say that. I would say rather that the Buddha refined asceticism, conceptually and practically. Conceptually, in essence, he replaced the notion of the more it hurts, the more it purifies, with the notion of the more you bring equanimity to an experience, the more purification occurs. If it's an unpleasant experience, that will purify consciousness in one way. If it's a pleasant experience and you bring equanimity to it, that will purify consciousness in another way, a related way, but from a slightly different angle. And if it's a neutral experience and you bring equanimity to it, that also purifies consciousness, even though it's a non-valenced experience. So what is equanimity? We can think of it as training our sense gates not to fight with themselves. So if, for example, just to give a specific example, if a sensation wants to arise, at some point the body may fight with its own sensation. But you can gradually train the body not to fight with its own sensations as they arise. If a sensation is about to pass, the body may hold on inappropriately long. But you can train the body not to hold on inappropriately long to the sensations it produces. And the same is true for the other sensory modalities. It's easiest to see in the body, but the same principles hold in visual experiences, image, sight, and in auditory experiences, sound and internal talk. You could think of equanimity as training the sensory circuits to get out of their own way, to not fight against their own productions, but also to not inappropriately hold on to their own productions. So one way, it's a little bit of an esoteric metaphor, but one way to think about equanimity is that it's a training of the sensory circuits out of their usual habit, which is to be rheopectic. As soon as they start to move, they coagulate. Training out of that habit into behaving like thixotropic substances, where the more you stir it, the thinner it gets, and therefore the less resistance it presents to change. As we bring equanimity to an uncomfortable experience, number one, that experience doesn't cause as much suffering, and number two, that experience delivers a flavor of purification, so that it's possible to get something positive, a taste of purification, even inside discomfort. Now, what about the pleasant experiences? The more you bring equanimity to a pleasant experience, the more that experience produces a quality called fulfillment, which is not the same as mere pleasure. Fulfillment is what we really want. Pleasure is what we think we want. So as you bring equanimity to a pleasant experience, it delivers more fulfillment. And also, it delivers the same flavor of purification. So you can get the sense that you are purifying consciousness by bringing equanimity to pleasant or unpleasant